Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Paranormal and Historical Occasions and Legends. I am Nick Muley. Uh, I got to say, it's been quite a while since I've done my show. It's literally been almost an entire month since I've done my last show. So I was definitely due for another show. I mean, to get my show back on the road. So I know, of course, obviously, you guys. Hang on one second. I'm just having some light issues here. Uh, um, but like I said, I know I obviously had to take a break from it from various reasons. But the main point, the bottom line is, it's just good to be back doing the shows again. So this is something I think it's going to be really. This is going to be definitely a real way of getting me back into the show business, if you will. Tonight we're going to be doing a very to kind of show my comeback, if you will, we're going to be talking about a very familiar, special paranormal case. I think most of us are, as far as I know, we're all too familiar with. Just before I do start saying, just before I do start presenting, I just want to say a quick couple shout outs. Hello, Bridget. Good to see you. Hey, Shelly. I'm not. Awesome. Amityville has your attention. I'm not sure who this is, but you're gonna have you have to let StreamYard you have to allow StreamYard to use your name so I could see who that is. So I do apologize not being able to reach out who that is. Yes, it's definitely great to be back, Shelly. Yes, thank you, Jeremy. But anyways, yeah, tonight we're going to be talking about probably one of the most notorious haunted house cases, and also one of the most controversial cases, uh, at least in paranormal history, the Amityville Horror. Now, before I get started with anything, another thing, before I get started with anything on it, first off, I do apologize that the light is disappearing on me a bit. It's this damn virtual background. That's always a problem sometimes. If this keeps going on, I might just have to lose the background. I think I got it now. But so this is going to be kind of a relatively different kind of presentation compared to the other ones that I do. The Amityville Horror, which I will say, and this is why I made this such a very important episode in this case, is the Amityville Horror was actually the very first case I ever studied, very first haunted house case I ever studied at a very young age, at only 12 years old at the time. Now, ironically enough, when I started, let's see here, who do we got? What's going on? Wild Bill, good to see you. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. There we go. Now I know. Now I know who you are. Testing message from Twitch, and yes, that's the other thing too, guys. Again, I'm sorry. Sorry, I always go off track for a minute or so. The Things Network, as well as several of our shows. Actually, I think mine might be one of the first. We have now officially expanded to Twitter and Twitch. So, I definitely see us expanding a lot more over the next coming weeks. So it's definitely awesome that I'm able to broadcast for literally a couple different websites now. Thank you very much, Zach. I'm going to assume that's you. Good to see you. But, anyways, yeah, the Amityville Horror case was my very first case I ever studied at a young age. And ironically enough, when I first studied this case at the young age of 12, ironically enough, it was around 2005, and it was right around when the remake came out. Now, I know the remake isn't always very much reviewed very well, for lack of a better term. But although, of course, some people have thought otherwise because Ryan Reynolds is in it. But that was a case that I remembered learning at a very, that was a case I learned that, well, not only a case I learned, but got my attention because I didn't realize that it was actually a remake of a horror film from the late of an original film from the late 1970s. So that was a case that I think over the next 2-3 years before I studied anything else, that was just something that I was simply trying to look at all the answers. I mean, I was just like I was trying to always figure out, what was true and what in fact was not. Because like I said, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the case. And that's actually what we're going to be kind of doing for tonight's show. So the way how this is going to work tonight is it's going to be because I only have an hour to do this, or less than an hour now. At 5 minutes have passed. Good evening, Natalie. Hey, Charles. Yes, I'm doing very well. Thank you. There's a good chance that we're going to have to split this slideshow into two parts, because this is probably, as far as I know, the longest presentation I have. And additionally, considering that there's a lot of information regarding this presentation, I actually already had the idea of splitting it into two parts from the beginning, because how we're going to do this whole slideshow tonight is we're going to start literally from the very beginning, from the time that the house was built, and if there was anything that was there prior to that. Now, there wasn't too much information I was able to find, but I was able to find some information. So we're going to go from the moment it was built to obviously the lives of the DeFeo family before they were murdered in the house, and then we'll eventually get to the Lutz family. Now, that's probably what I'm going to consider most likely part two, obviously, but still, it's always best to explain it ahead of time. We'll then obviously we'll later explain about the Lutz family, the supposed paranormal activity that occurred in the aftermath, and then eventually although a lot of it's not true, eventually we will get to what really happened in that house. But that's most likely going to be for next week. So tonight, like I said, we're just going to focus on from the beginning and the DeFeo family. And I actually do have a number of interesting clips to show you guys. So hopefully this will definitely fill the entire hour. And yes, those windows are so iconic. They definitely are. It's the classic eye windows, and that's what I always love, about this case. It's not only just the real I mean, it's not only just the real case, but even the movies themselves, the official movies. It is not all these damn like cheap rip-off movies that have been made over the last couple years that have nothing to do with the Amityville Horror at all. I'm talking about the official franchise, and what I always love about it is, I think we could all agree here, and I think everybody talks about, is the eye windows of this house. I mean, along with the bizarre pumpkin, excuse me, along with the bizarre pumpkin shape to the house as well, due to it being a Dutch colonial. So when you kind of think about it, with the bizarre pumpkin shape and the eye windows, like right behind me, it definitely gives the house a very unsettling and malevolent appearance. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen several of the films where, ironically enough, there's never really one recurring character. It's really just the house itself. So, if you look into the franchise, you can pretty much see that the house becomes pretty much more or less the main character of itself. But anyways, we're going to get started. Let me just get the, see, I always have trouble getting these sharing these slideshows. So let me just make sure that you guys can see it. I always got to check the phone too for this. All right, what do we got here? Did not mean for that to happen. All right, so give me one. Here we go. All right, awesome. All right, so obviously, as previously said, we're going to be obviously talking about the Amityville Horror. So let's begin right from the start. Obviously, like I said, we are going to talk tonight. Tonight's topic on Amityville, we're going to be talking about the DeFeo family that previously had lived there. But before we get right to, like I said, before we get right to the history of the family, we're going to talk quickly first about just a little bit. Oh, wait a minute, that's weird. I've never had that issue before. I'm gonna have to fix that. That was I've never seen that. I know I had them all put together like in order, but that was kind of strange. It doesn't matter. We'll just continue to press on. So, according to deeds and information compiled by the Amityville Historical Society, the Ocean Avenue property had once been farmland belonging to the Irelands, one of Amityville's most prominent and influential families. On January 14th, 1924, Annie Ireland sold the property to John and Catherine Moynihan. I'm sorry. Now, I got to say this already. Before I continue onwards, I did try looking for any like actual older photographs of like when the house was brand new at the time, but I was unable, or the original owners, but I was unable to find any. But that's just sometimes the case when you're going through a lot of when you're trying to get your history research done. But anyways, the following year, Amityville builder Jesse Purdy constructed the large Dutch Colonial at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville in Long Island, New York. That still stands there today. While their new home was being built, the Moynahans, okay, I think that's how you say it, relocated to the old house down the street. When the house was finished, the family of six moved back in and once again enjoyed life by the Amityville Creek happily for many years. When John and Catherine Moynihan died, their daughter, Eileen Fitzgerald, moved in with her own family. She lived there until October 17th, 1960, when John and Mary Riley, parents of 11-year-old and future Christine Riley, bought the house. Because of marital problems, the Rileys divorced and sold the house on June 28th, 1965. So already you guys can kind of get an idea, and it just seems like this could already be somewhat of a source of controversy regards of paranormal wise, because quite clearly is what you guys can see. It didn't seem like anybody prior to the DeFeos had ever had any problems paranormal wise during their time living in this house, or even during right shortly after the house's construction. But now fast forwarding, so now this is where the real story kind of begins, if you will. Robert DeFeo Sr. purchased the 3-story Dutch colonial home equipped with a boathouse on the Amityville River and plenty of rooms for his wife Louise and their 5 children, Robert Jr., Dawn, Allison, Mark, and newborn John, who renovated it, landscaped it, and put in a swimming pool. It was the American dream, a beautiful house, happy family, and money to spare. The DeFeos even placed a sign in the front. Hang on one second. In the front of the house that read "High Hopes" as a symbol for the family's good fortune and for the future. Obviously, sorry guys, I'm having a little trouble reading because let's just see. Oh wait, here we go. Never mind. The little bar was blocking some parts of what I was able to read. The DeFeos even placed a sign in the front yard that read "High Hopes" as a symbol of the family's good fortune and dreams for the future. It was the American dream. Oh, wait a minute. That's okay. Somehow, I don't know what happened here, but somehow some of the information got copied again. I'll go back and fix that later. That was weird. Unfortunately, however, we always view as like them as the happy American family. Apparently, behind the success and happiness from the time they moved in and lived up until the time of their deaths, the DeFeo family was dysfunctional and often used violence to resolve situations. Ronald Sr. was a brutal and angry man, prone to outbreaks of rage and violence. He and Louise often fought, and he was a threatening figure to his children. As the oldest child, Ronald Jr. often bore the brunt of his father's expectations and bad temper. He was an overweight, sullen boy who was often picked on in school. His father harassed him to stand up for himself, but never at home. Ronald Sr. had no patience for disobedience or backchat. As Ronald Jr. got older, he grew stronger and larger and was no longer as tolerant of his father's abuse. By the age of 17, Ronald Jr., or Butch, as he was called by his friends, was using serious drugs and dabbling in petty thievery. He was expelled from school because of his drug use. His behavior had also become more erratic, and his violent outbursts more psychotic. Butch's temper had grown as hot as his father's, and when he reached adolescence, they often succumbed to fist-fighting matches. Even Ronald Sr., with his own anger issues, began to realize that his son's temper and violent behavior were not normal. Now, contrary to popular belief, as you guys can see right here, this mugshot photo of him, I originally thought this was just another mugshot of him after he committed the murders. However, if you guys can clearly see on the date of when, on whatever you call those things, um, when it comes to mugshots, you can clearly see this occurred a year before the murders. So I believe that was when he was arrested for, I think it was for some type of drug use. So, and it's quite, kind of an unsettling photo too, because just by his appearance, he definitely does have that Charlie Manson kind of look. It just seems like, he just doesn't appear. He just doesn't look like he's to appear like someone that you would run into throughout. I mean, it doesn't appear that looks like someone that's part of society. You could clearly tell this guy definitely definitely's had some history with drugs, that's for sure. So even though he was well looked after by his family, however, even though he was well looked after by his family, landing an easy job at his grandfather's car dealership, where he received a weekly allowance whether he turned up to work or not, Ronald Jr. was growing more angry and resentful of his father's supposedly stingy ways. Ronald Sr. and Louise arranged for Butch to visit a psychiatrist, but it did not help. Ronald Jr. insisted that there was nothing wrong with him and refused to work with the psychiatrist. In the absence of any other solution, the DeFeos began simply buying Butch whatever he wanted in order to placate him. At the age of 14, his father gave him a $14,000 speedboat to cruise the Amityville River. Whenever Ronald Jr. needed money, he only had to ask, and it was given to him. The altercations with his father, however, grew more frequent and certainly more dangerous. One night, a fight started between Robert Sr. and Louise. To settle the matter, Butch took a 12-gauge shotgun from his room, placed a shell into the chamber, and went downstairs. He walked into the room, pointed the gun at his father, and pulled the trigger. Strangely, though, it did not go off. Ronald Sr., as you could probably very well imagine, sat frozen in his chair and watched as his son lowered the gun and walked out of the room. Ronald Jr. seemed completely unconcerned that he had nearly killed his father in cold blood. The fight was over, but Butch's reaction was an indication of events to come. And just before we continue onwards, I gotta say, for a family that obviously is, I guess you can pretty much say a very dysfunctional one that's got a lot of issues, that obviously they have a lot of issues going through, the father, being abusive, the oldest son, not only being one of his victims, but also being just as bad, if not worse. I think we could pretty much be all familiar that, if something like this occurs to a particular family, it's definitely, that's just, I guess you can kind of say it's really like the beginning of the end for this family, because you just know that something is really bad is going to happen. And it just seemed like the DeFeo family really, I guess I could probably say it's just kind of one of those things that it was expected to occur at some point. We just didn't know exactly when, all hell was going to break loose. So, it's just, I can't imagine what the lives, especially for the younger kids of this family, must have been like, to be living with a family that just didn't seem like your all-American happy family at all. Now, in the weeks before the murders, the relationship between Ronald Jr. and his father reached a breaking point. He was unhappy with the money that he earned from his father and planned a fake robbery with a friend while he was on the way to the bank to deposit $20,000 from the dealership, splitting the stolen cash with his friend. Oops, that was my fault. Ronald Sr. exploded into a rage when he heard Butch's story, berating the staff member who had entrusted him with the money in the first place. When Ronald Sr. exposed his sham, Ronald Jr. wanted revenge. The police were called, who interviewed Butch. Instead of devising a fictional story about the robbery, he became tense and irritable with them. He soon became violent when they began to suspect that he was lying. Butch started cursing them and banging on the hood of a car to emphasize his rage. The police backed off for the moment, but Ronald Sr. had already come to his own conclusions about his son's behavior. He knew that he had stolen the money. On the Friday, so now fast forwarding just a bit more, on the Friday before the murders, the police had asked Ronald Jr. to look at some mugshots on the chance that he might be able to identify the thief who had allegedly robbed him. He agreed to do this, but then backed out at the last minute. When his father heard this, he confronted Butch and demanded to know why he didn't want to help the authorities. The two began shouting at one another, and then Ronald ran to his car and drove away. This fight, fortunately, had not turned violent, but the worst was yet to come, that's for sure. Now, this is where things really took a turn for the worse for this family. 9 years after the DeFeo family moved in, excuse me, 9 years after the DeFeo family had moved into the house, the night of Wednesday, November 13th, 1974, was a cool one in Amityville. Everyone had gone to sleep with exception of 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., who was brooding in his room. The more he simmered in his thoughts, the more determined he became to solve his problems once and for all. Butch left the second floor TV room armed with his 35 caliber Marlin rifle from some storage space where he kept several weapons and started off silently but purposefully toward his parents' bedroom. Now, 1 second. I just want to say, as usual, everyone who's watching right now, again, I do apologize that I'm not. If you guys haven't seen me, if I haven't given any shout outs, again, when I'm doing these slideshows, I'm unable to. I can't see these comments when I'm doing this, unfortunately. But I just want to check also from the personal profile because for some reason some of the comments do not apparently show up on the stream on the feed for some reason. So I just want to give a quick shout out for those who've been watching through my personal profile. Okay, Mom, good to see you. Hey, what's going on, Josh? Hey, Gary, Tally, glad. Thanks for tuning in. What's up, Cherokee? Good to see you. Okay, moving on. He entered his parents' bedroom, instantly killing his father, 43-year-old Ronald DeFeo Sr., with 2 shots of the lower back. The first shot ripped into Ronald Sr.'s back, tearing his kidney and exiting through his chest. The second shot, again fired into his back, pierced his father's spine and lodged in his neck. His mother, 42-year-old Louise, was now awake, but had no time to react before Ronald Jr. fired at her too. He shot her twice as well, shattering her rib cage and collapsing her right lung, and then left her to die. I mean, and that was something I recently had learned about exactly where he actually shot at them. I mean, believe it or not, for you guys, whenever I've done this presentation, for a lot of the local friends of mine, I actually do have the actual crime photos of all the victims, believe it or not. I thought about it originally, but I decided, of course, understandably, I was not going to add them onto the slideshow because obviously that would have been way too graphic for me to to put on. I mean, they may be somewhat historical value, but I don't want to make it I don't want to make it graphic, obviously, to drive everyone away. So showing these other crime photos of the house itself was probably would probably be the exception. But I will tell you though, a lot of times after when I showed the crime photos to everybody, personally, it kind of shocked a lot of people and imagining, exactly where not only sometimes you actually even had a little bit of a hard time of exactly where the bullet holes had entered them, but actually being able to find exactly where they were hit, it's got to be, especially for Louise, it had to, considering that she was pretty much left to die. Imagine that it must have been a long, slow, painful death. So definitely, truly horrible indeed. But that's as now I know a lot of you guys already know this story, but I'll still say it anyway. I wish I could say that was the end, but there was worse to come. Butch left his parents' room to continue the massacre. His two younger brothers, 12-year-old Mark and not 12-year-old Mark and 9-year-old John were his next victims. Standing between their beds in the room, the two young boys shared. He fired one shot at close range into each of their bodies. Mark was killed instantly, while John, whose spinal cord was severed by his brother's attack, twitched for a few moments and then lay still. Again, the shots had not roused the remaining members of the family. Finally, he entered the room of his sisters. 18 Oh wait, that's okay, I forgot. For some reason, I don't know what happened to the animation, but he entered the room of his sisters, 18-year-old Dawn and 13-year-old Allison. As Ronald Jr. walked into the room, Allison stirred and looked up just as he pointed the rifle at her face and pulled the trigger. His youngest sister was killed instantly. Butch aimed his weapon at Dawn's face as well, blowing off the left side of her face. It was around 3:15 a.m. that morning. In less than 15 minutes, Ronald DeFeo Jr. had brutally killed every member of his family in cold blood. DeFeo's parents had been shot, as already mentioned. DeFeo's parents had been both shot twice, while the children had all been killed with single shots. Butch calmly showered, trimmed his beard, and dressed in jeans and work boots. Excuse me. He then gathered his bloody clothing and the rifle, wrapped them up in a pillowcase, and left the house in his car. Ronald Jr. drove into Brooklyn and threw the pillowcase and its contents into a storm drain. He then returned to Long Island and reported to work at his grandfather's Buick dealership. The murders were eventually reported by Butch himself when at around 6:30 p.m. later that day, he burst into Henry's bar in Amityville and declared, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." DeFeo and a small group of people went to 112 Ocean Avenue, which was located not far from the bar, and found that DeFeo's parents and siblings were indeed dead. One of the group, Joe Yeswood, made an emergency call to the Suffolk County Police, who searched the house and found that 6 members of the same family were dead in their beds. Ronald Jr. Sorry for some of the typing here, guys. I've been meaning to cut some of the same, because obviously it is kind of describing some of these individuals. But anyways, Ronald Jr. was the family's lone surviving member. He was taken into the local police station for his own protection after suggesting to police officers at the scene of the crime that the killings had been carried out by a mafia hit man named Tony Mazzio, whom he claimed had a vendetta against him. The detectives grew suspicious when they found an empty gun box in his bedroom that matched the murder weapon. However, an interview with DeFeo at the station soon exposed serious inconsistencies in his version of events. The following day, however, he confessed to carrying out the killings himself, and Mazzio had an airtight alibi proving he was out of the state at the time of the killings. DeFeo told detectives, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." He admitted that he had taken a bat, redressed and discarded crucial evidence like blood-stained clothes, the Marlin rifle, and cartridges on his way to work as usual. The local community were devastated. The DeFeos were a well-known family within the community, despite a lot of the dysfunctions they went through. Their children attended the local schools with the other children of Amityville. Locals watched with horror as Ronald DeFeo Jr. was taken away by police. He was later tried and convicted for all of the murders. Now, there are some controversies, believe it or not, that are surrounding this particular case, especially due to the fact that these murders occurred late at night, obviously at 3:15 a.m., which of course we're all familiar with. That's considered the witching hour, of course. No doubt about that, but still, just the very fact of how this all occurred and the bizarre. Uh, I can't even really think of the word I can think of. Uh, responses. Let's say, for lack of a better term. There's just something kind of weird about this whole thing because what I was able to find was that all six of the victims were found lying on their stomachs, face down in their beds, with their heads resting on their arms, as if something had held them there while they were shot, with no signs of a struggle or sedatives having been administered, leading to speculation that someone in the house should have been awakened by the noise of the gunshots. And even strangely, although they did say Luis and Allison may have awoken prior before they were killed, still not one of the family appeared to have been woken by the sounds of the gunshots, even though the high-powered rifle that was used can normally be heard up to a mile away when fired, according to gun experts. Oops. Neighbors did not, and even more strangely, neighbors did not report hearing any gunshots being fired either. Yet they claim that the only sound they heard was the barking of the DeFeo family dog. The police investigation concluded that most of the victims were asleep at the time of the murders and that the rifle had not been fitted with a suppressor or silencer, in other words. Police officers and the medical examiner who attended the scene were initially puzzled by the rapid, sorry, I'm always terrible with some of these words, with the scale of the killings, and considered the possibility that more than one person had been responsible for the crime. During his time in jail, Ronald DeFeo Jr. has given several inconsistent accounts of how the killings were carried out. It was said that in one version, it was said that he drugged the family at dinner time so they would not awaken as he moved from room to room, shooting each one with the rifle, although the autopsies discredited this theory. The police believe that the house muffled the sound of the shots. However, many people who have been in the house reported that street noise could be heard from the inside. And that's the other thing too. If you look at a lot of the pictures of not only what the house looked like back then, but even of how it looks today, um, it's quite close to two houses on both sides. So you would have thought that the neighbors, especially those who lived right next door, should have heard something. I mean, from what I've also gathered is that the walls for this house wasn't really, as far as I know, they weren't. And last time I checked, they weren't soundproof. So somebody should have heard something to begin with, especially involving a Marlin rifle. I mean, I've heard about those in particular that they when they're fired, they definitely make, as like they said, it makes a pretty loud noise. So it's really strange. But until his death, Butch continued to change his story. Being a habitual liar, it is still unclear what role he played in the murders and whether he acted alone. For many, the truth remains to be told, and investigations are in progress that may shed light on the validity of this story. Let's see. Okay, I was trying to figure out, I wonder why all the pictures were not showing up, and now they decide to show up. That was weird. Anyways, Ronald Jr. was put on trial for the killings on October 14th, 1975. He and his defense lawyer, William Weber, mounted an affirmative defense of insanity, with DeFeo claiming he killed his family in self-defense because he heard their voices plotting against him. ironically enough, and almost exactly in a similar way, he also claimed he heard demonic voices in the house telling him to do it. The insanity plea was supported by the psychiatrist for the defense, Dr. Daniel Schwartz. The psychiatrist for the prosecution, Dr. Harold Zolan, maintained that although DeFeo was an abuser of heroin and LSD, he had antisocial personality disorder and was aware of his actions at the time of the crime. When asked during his trial why he had done such a thing, Butch replied, "As far as I'm concerned, if I didn't kill my family, they were going to kill me. And as far as I'm concerned, what I did was self-defense, and there was nothing wrong with it. When I got a gun in my hand, there's no doubt in mind who I am. I am God." Quite clear. It seemed like even back, I mean, for such a for a person to commit such a gruesome murder like that, it's quite obviously clear this guy really was truly out of his mind. I mean, it just from what I've seen from interviews of him, well, not exactly interviews of him when around the time he committed the murders, but decades later, because I don't know of any particular interviews that were filmed of him back in the 70s, aside from, sometimes appearing on the news footage, but a lot of the interview footage of him that he's appeared on with different documentaries decades after he committed this crime, it just seems like to me that he just, up until his death, he just seemed like he had no remorse whatsoever for what he did to his family. I mean, if I think the best way I could really say about, when it comes to such a crime like this, if you're basically, you know, living in a house that apparently, if you're basically living in a household that's a very dysfunctional family, and sorry, I'm just checking. Sorry, I got some comments, and your family's kind of giving you a bit of trouble, especially involving your father. As crazy as it sounds, that kind of lifestyle. Okay, maybe in a fit of rage, he went after his dad. Not sure why he goes after his mom, but I sure know, however, that he didn't have to go after the other kids, his siblings, however, because as far as I've seen, there is no indication that they had ever done anything to him ever. So, just a horrific crime. Now, before we continue on with the results of what happened, this is kind of a rarity of what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm about to present next. I have actually managed to find rare footage of the not necessarily the crime itself, but obviously footage that was taken shortly after the murders. I got about 3 different clips here that I'm going to present. The first one is just simple footage, of the house itself, people walking around, and then the other two, if I'm correct on them, they're actual like interviews of neighbors who knew the DeFeo. So we're going to start off with this. This I think is about 30 seconds long, and I was expecting I was going to have more footage of the entire event, but until YouTube eventually uploads it, or if there's anywhere else, or any, unless there's any other availability, these are the only pieces of footage I was able to find of the news of the murders that occurred back in 1974. I guess this was just simply some B-roll that they shot. Okay, so that was the first one. Like I said, that was just really for the most part just B-roll of the entire crime scene. Now the next one is neighbors who were interviewed, who knew that, as far as from what I know, it seemed like these people quite pretty much knew this family very well. So here is the second clip.
He came, he opened the door, and he was screaming, "Come on, help me! Somebody shot my mother and father." Everyone ran out of the bar, and that was it. They all took off. No, I had to stay. I was tending well. They all jumped in his car and took off. Today, police combed the DeFeo's handsome three-story house for clues, while divers explored the backyard swimming pool for the still unfound murder weapon. Police have been questioning the son, Ronald, and now say he is being, quote, safeguarded. Investigators say without explanation that they now feel young DeFeo was in the house at the time of murders, but they're not yet considering him a suspect. And so forth.
No suspect at this time. We have no indication of the motive at this time.
What about Ronald DeFeo, the son, the surviving son?
Ronald is being safeguarded by the Suffolk County Police at this time.
Why safeguarded?
Why? Because the 6 members of the family dead, and we don't know why, and he's the sole remaining member.
Is he also a suspect?
He's not a suspect at this time.
Few people in the neighborhood knew the family well, but those who did described them as close-knit.
I think they were just very sweet, very religious people, very family-minded people. That's about all I could say. Very good, very generous type. Very close with their children.
There's one element in the usual mass murder story which seems to be missing from this case. There's no sense of fear in this community. No feeling of a mass murderer on the loose. People we talked to seem to feel that whatever was the motive for this crime, it had something to do with the family. It's not something that's going to return to bother anyone else. In Amityville, Long Island, Bill Barno, News Center 4.
Okay, now I got one more clip to show. This is this is the footage of when Ronald DeFeo Jr. was arrested. I should have said too, I'm not sure. I know these clips are all short, but I'm not exactly sure how long. So but so far, this has been I guess I actually had a lot more than I expected, because I thought these videos were only just gonna be like a minute long. So here is the third and final clip, and I'm gonna play one other thing that I'm actually gonna play from my phone. As soon as we finish this, as soon as we finish this up, I was fortunate enough to have found a radio report as well regarding the murders. So I got one more clip to play after this one.
DeFeo appeared for arraignment at the First District Court in Hauppauge, where he was ordered held without bail. As is standard practice in a multiple murder case, he was arraigned in only one of the killings, that of his 12-year-old brother Mark. The court agreed to let a physician treat DeFeo for injuries to his face, but it refused to allow a psychiatric examination for him, which had been requested by the defense attorney.
Well, based upon my conversations this morning with the defendant, Ronald DeFeo, and based upon the nature of the charge, and that he's alleged to have taken the lives of 6 members of his family, in my opinion, I don't think he presently understands the nature of the proceedings, and I don't think he can therefore properly assist in his defense.
Now, what was your... Simon says he'll continue trying to get the psychiatric examination for his client, and he has not ruled out the possibility that he may enter a plea of insanity. The case is expected to go to the grand jury on Monday. At that time, the district attorney will enter evidence in all 6 murders. In Suffolk County, Bill Barno, News Center 4.
Okay, so then the final clip out. So now finally the last one I have here to play. Just give me 1 second here. This, like I said, I have to play this one off my phone because this was actually audio, so I wasn't able to really I wasn't able to get this on. I wasn't able to get it onto the slideshow. I guess maybe I just didn't have enough time. But anyways, now here's the final report I was able to find. Hopefully you guys can hear this one. Give me 1 second here.
This is WOR New York. Stay tuned for In Conversation. First, this bulletin from the WOR newsroom. 6 members of one family have been found shot to death in their night clothes in their expensive home in Amityville, Long Island. The only available information at this moment, according to the Amityville Village Police, is that the victims have been identified as members of the DeFeo family. They were found by a 23-year-old son, Ronald DeFeo, who is believed to be the only surviving member of the family. 6 members of the family found shot to death in their home in Amityville, Long Island. We will have further details on the 11 o'clock news.
Very unsettling. Again, just that probably had to have been quite a community tragedy. So just very, very disturbing crime. So, anyways, in the end, I mean, when by the time this was all over on November 21st, 1975, over a year since the murders occurred. I mean, over a year since the murders, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. The court found that Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s motive for murdering his family was the $200,000 insurance that was payable to him. On December 4th, Judge Thomas Stark sentenced Ronald DeFeo Jr. to six concurrent sentences of 25 years to life. DeFeo did not react to the sentence. If there was a shock or fear, he didn't show it. Then again, he had said that he never had any feelings about anything. My feelings went away a long time ago, he once said. DeFeo was held in Greenhaven Correctional Facility, Beekman, New York, and all of his appeals to the parole board to date have been denied. With the family dead, the house went up for sale. The horrific nature of the massacre unnerved the otherwise quiet Long Island neighborhood. The murdered members of the DeFeo family are buried in nearby St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale. Now, Ronald DeFeo Jr. himself died now less than a year ago on March 12, 2021, at the age of 69 at the Albany Medical Center. The official cause of death to this day has yet to be determined. And as a result, his body was cremated. Now, we might end just a few minutes early. However, the only other thing I'm going to show in regards to the crime was these are the actual photos of the funeral of the DeFeo family. A very, very sad scene indeed. I don't know exactly who was in line first regarding the coffins, but these were, as far as I know, the only known photos of the funeral of the DeFeo family. And obviously on the bottom you got the grave, which to this day it still pretty much looks the same, even after, even almost 50 years later. Not much of it has been changed a lot. Fortunately, it hasn't become a site where a lot of people, a lot of frequent visitors show up. It's never been vandalized. It's never been, always approached by so many curiosity seekers. At least in my opinion, it's definitely a sign of respect. Now, it's this entire murder that occurred in this house. It's just, I don't know exactly. I mean, I still remember when I studied it, again, at only 12 years old. This was, even though it was my very first case I ever studied, it's really a case that I can't even really describe to you, because I don't think we're ever going to fully know the truth behind what drove Ronald DeFeo Jr. to complete madness to murder his entire family. Like I said, I believe, at least in my opinion, because there was some involvement with money, I believe that, especially even with the siblings, they were somehow getting him, despite the fact that he had problems with, his father and, somewhat his mother at times, not as much. I don't know who was just, hang on one second. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know who was just calling me, but that was unexpected. But anyways, I believe that, that the other siblings had gotten in the way of this whole involvement with money, but I think there was a lot more to it as well. And I think that's probably the reason why, the siblings are gone. Now, we are going to cut early, however, to fill up the last couple minutes of tonight's show. I know I'm cutting a little bit ahead of time to what's going to happen next, but I will say this, however. obviously a lot of you guys are familiar with the movies that obviously started with the original Amityville Horror in 1979. However, the second movie that came out a few years afterwards in 1982, actually, if you guys don't know it, in fact, is a prequel to the original, because this whole murder case that I obviously have presented to you guys tonight later became the basis of the second Amityville film, Amityville 2: The Possession. So I'm going to exit the slideshow here. I'm going to share the screen one more time. And let me just give a quick shout out for everyone who has commented. So again, I'm sorry I didn't see earlier. Yviette, good to see you. Hey, Greg, very much appreciate it. It's definitely great to be back. Yes, Terry, absolutely. I don't know who that is, but thanks for tagging out Christopher Quarantino on that. I appreciate that. What's up, Josh? What's going on, Adrian? Let's see. I don't know what just happened here, but got to share it out to. Thanks, Josh. Jeremy. Excuse me, Jeremy. Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate that. Yeah, they definitely were brutal, horrific. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, very sad. About this whole thing. Yeah, imagine how those children must have felt. But again, this all occurred. Most of them were asleep when this all happened, so they never even probably had a chance. Hey, Ben, good to see you. In 74, it's all you were 3 years old. Wow. Let's see. Josh, thank you very much. Very much. It's definitely good to be back. But anyways, to fill up the last 5 minutes, I'm going to share the screen one final time, like I said, to get the I'm going to show 2 trailers of Amityville. Again, I know it seems strange, but I'm going to show the trailers to Amityville 2: The Possession, which again, that was the again, for those who just tuned in, that's actually the prequel to the original Amityville film. So give me 1 second here. I just want to make sure that the screen is actually showing. Oops. Okay, here we go. All right, so here is the trailer of the original. I'm just kidding. Here is the trailer of the 1982 prequel of the Amityville Horror, Amityville 2: The Possession.
The night of February 5th, 1976, George and Kathleen Lutz and their 3 children fled their home in Amityville, New York, and never returned. For them, the horror was over. Their living nightmare shocked audiences around the world in the Amityville Horror. But before them, another family lived in this house and were caught by the original evil. The Lutzes escaped with their lives, but the previous owners weren't so lucky.
Look at it! Ours! Heavenly Father, bless our new home and watch over us as we become a part of
For
this.
the Montelli family, it was their dream house until it turned into a nightmare.
Who's there?
What was in this house? What evil could drive their son to madness and destroy everything and everyone he loved? Now, Amityville 2: The Possession. Amityville 2: The Possession.
Man, very powerful film. It was the only other film, believe it or not, that was oh wait, hang on 1 second. It was the only other film that actually had the same composer from the original to do the same kind of music. Now I got I got one final clip to show. That is, if I could find it, give me 1 second here, and then we will close up for tonight. But definitely something definitely something you guys got to check out. Ironically enough, Amityville 2: The Possession, it's also considered the darkest and probably the most terrifying of all the entire Amityville franchise. Now, if you guys haven't seen this one, understandably, there are some differences compared to the real life family. Of course, I don't have enough time to really explain. Plus, for those who are, who haven't seen it yet, I don't want to give it away. So I'm going to show just one final clip, and then we're going to end for tonight. Now, I always just like showing. To me, the television, this is actually a television spot of the film, which I don't know. I like it just as much as the trailers. So this one's only just about 30 seconds long.
5 years ago, the Lutz family fled their home in Amityville, New York. 5 years ago, the Lutz family fled their home in Amityville, New York. They were lucky to escape with their lives. But the previous owners, the Montellis, weren't so lucky. They were caught by the original evil that possessed the house, an evil that drove their son to destroy everything and everyone he loved. Now, Amityville 2: The Possession, rated R.
Start tomorrow, EFCO Westwood, Paramount, Hollywood.
Okay. All right. We're going to have to wrap things up here because I only got another minute left and I don't want to go over the limit. But like I said, next week, this concludes tonight's show. Next week, we will continue on with part 2 of the Amityville Horror, focusing on the Lutz family that moved in shortly afterwards. But I just want to say very quickly, I really do appreciate you guys coming on, watching this. It's definitely great to be back in business, not only in the paranormal field, but getting my show back on. And, I'm very much proud of a lot of the viewers that were actually able to come on and not only support my show, but also the Things Network and the PAC channel. I don't know about anyone else, but I think we got a lot more exciting things coming up. And the Amityville Horror, I will say, will probably be one of, I think a lot of you guys are going to say this might be my best one yet, but trust me, there's a few other slideshows I have in store that you haven't seen yet. But so like I said, next week we will continue on with Amityville Horror, and as you guys saw with Amityville 2: The Possession, as I always do with a lot of these movies, I too also have a copy of it. Like I said, this is the prequel to the original 1979 Amityville Horror, which again, that we will also briefly be focusing on when we tune back in for part 2. I think that might be it. I'm just checking to see if there was, because sometimes I also keep a list of anything else. Oops. Yeah, I think I pretty much. I think my camera's pretty much had enough. But anyways, thank you all so much for coming on. Again, I really do appreciate it. And Josh, thanks again. And Natalie, just wait until next week. Again, this is just the beginning. And I also do apologize too for some of the mistypes and stuff and some of the animation errors. The other thing is, eventually I will be broadcasting some of these slideshows again in the future. Hopefully I'll have the corrections placed by then. And Greg, I'll just see very quickly because I got to go. Keep your arms and feet within. Please keep your arms and feet within the vehicle at all times. All right. Thank you guys all very much. I really appreciate it. I cannot wait for next week. And, again, I just really can't thank you guys all enough. Thank you guys again. You guys all have a great night. I'll see you guys next week, same time. And we will continue on with part 2 of the Amityville Horror. You guys all have a great night, and I'll see you guys next week.